Well, are you ready to get into Yah's Word today? I am as well. I want to invite you to open your Bibles with me to Leviticus chapter 8. We're going to begin with verse 33 in just a moment. We're tracking along with the Torah portion for this week, and the Torah portion is entitled Eighth, like in eighth day. My message title today is Strange Fire. So we're going to start out with Moshe speaking to Aharon and to his sons. Leviticus chapter 8, beginning with verse 33. And do not go outside the door of the tent of appointment for 7 days until the days of your ordination are completed. For he fills your hands for 7 days. Yah has commanded to do as he has done this day to make atonement for you. And stay at the door of the tent of appointment day and night for 7 days. And you shall guard the duty of Yah and not die, for so I have been commanded. And Aharon and his sons did all the words that Yah had commanded by the hand of Moshe. And so this is the season where Yah is speaking to Moshe concerning setting apart the priesthood, setting apart Aharon and his sons, and this is a time of ordination for the priesthood. So you can read all about what was taking place there in Leviticus chapter 8 concerning the ordination of the priesthood. Now let's look at Leviticus chapter 9 and verse 1. It says, And on the 8th day it came to be that Moshe called Aharon and his sons and the elders of Israel and said to Aharon, Take for yourself a young bull as a sin offering and a ram as an ascending offering, a perfect one, and bring them before Yah. And speak to the children of Israel, saying, Take a male goat as a sin offering, and a calf and a lamb, both a year old, perfect ones, as an ascending offering, and a bull and a ram as peace offerings, to slaughter before Yah, and a grain offering mixed with oil. For today Yah shall appear to you. And they took what Moshe commanded before the tent of appointment. And all the congregation drew near and stood before Yah. And Moshe said, This is the word which Yah commanded you to do, so that the esteem of Yah appears to you. And so it's really interesting that Yah is very particular. He gives the Torah concerning every sacrifice, every event that's to transpire. When he speaks to them concerning building the dwelling place in the wilderness, he gives great detail. He says, be sure to build it exactly the way that I tell you. He's very specific. And so we see all of that as we read through these verses that pertain to these sacrifices. Look at Leviticus chapter 9, starting with verse 23. It says, And Moshe and Aharon went into the tent of appointment and came out and blessed the people, and the esteem of Yah appeared to all the people, and fire came out from before Yah and consumed the ascending offering and the fat on the slaughter place, and all the people saw and cried aloud and fell on their faces. So when things are done right, when things are done according to Yah's plan, Yah's prescription, then fire will go forth from Yah and consume the offerings. And that's how you want it, because you don't want the fire of Yah consuming you. We're going to see that's what happened here with two of Aharon's sons. Leviticus chapter 10, beginning with verse 1. And Nadab and Abihu, the sons of Aharon, each took his fire holder and put fire in it and put incense on it and brought strange fire. That's where I got the title of this message. They brought strange fire before Yah, which he had not commanded them. In other words, they were not listening to the instructions of Yah. They were bringing before Yah strange fire. They were doing it their own way. They weren't following his commands. We don't have a lot of details concerning their motivation, but we see them bringing strange fire. before Yah. Verse 2, and fire came out from Yah and consumed them. See, when you don't do it Yah's way, he will not accept it. When you try to force your way upon him, he will reject it. It says fire came out from Yah and consumed them, and they died before Yah. Then Moshe said to Aharon, this is what Yah spoke, saying, by those who come near me, let me be set apart. In other words, you have to do it my way. If you're going to come near me, then you're going to have to obey my Torah. You're going to have to obey my commands. You're going to have to do it my way. I am set apart. And before all the people, let me be esteemed. Your obedience will esteem me before the people. You're acknowledging that Yah is the creator, and we are to do everything that he commands us to do. And Aharon was silent. And Moshe called to Mishael and to Elzaphan, the sons of Uzziel, the uncle of Aharon, and said to them, come near, take your brothers from before the set-apart place out of the camp. So they came near and took them by their long shirts out of the camp, as Moshe had said. And Moshe said to Aharon and to Eleazar and to Ithamar, his sons, do not unbind your heads, don't take off your turbans, nor tear your garments, lest you die, and wrath come upon all the people. But let your brothers, all the house of Israel, bewail the burning which Yah has kindled. And do not go out from the door of the tent of appointment, lest you die, for the anointing oil of Yah is upon you. And they did according to the word of Moshe. Again, you cannot expect Yah to do it your way. He is set apart. And he requires obedience, complete obedience from his children, especially those who are drawing near and offering sacrifices. He requires obedience from all of us. But we will see here as we look into Exodus chapter 25, what I was speaking of a moment ago, and how Yah is meticulous in giving instructions, and he wants things done his way. Exodus chapter 25, starting with verse 8, it says, and they shall make me a set apart place, and I shall dwell in their midst, according to all that I show you, the pattern of the dwelling place and the pattern of all its furnishings, make it exactly so. And so I want to apply these words to how we are to come before Yah and worship him. We are to worship him with a pure form of worship that is defined by Torah. We are not to mix in pagan days and pagan ways and lots of things of the world. We're not to have a mixed up form of worship. But Yah says, have a pure form of worship before me. And he gives us the specifics in his word. So we see in Exodus chapter 25 and verse 40, it says this, so see and do according to the pattern which was shown to you on the mountain. Do it Yah's way. And then we see in Exodus chapter 40, starting with verse 33, and he raised up the courtyard all around the dwelling place and the slaughter place, and placed the covering of the courtyard gate, and Moshe completed the work. Well, did he do it according to Yah's design? Notice what it says, verse 34, and the cloud covered the tent of appointment, and the esteem of Yah filled the dwelling place. And Moshe was not able to come into the tent of appointment because the cloud dwelt on it, and the esteem of Yah filled the dwelling place. So the answer is yes. Moshe built the dwelling place of Yah in the wilderness exactly according to Yah's prescription. He did it just as Yah had commanded. And when he did, then Yah filled the dwelling place, and his esteem was so great that Moshe couldn't even enter in to the tent of appointment because the cloud dwelt on it. and the esteem of Yah filled the dwelling place. Hallelujah. So now we're going to talk about a few examples in just a moment of strange fire being offered to Yah. But before we do that, I want to show you in the Torah and in all of Scripture that the Scripture prohibits the offering of strange fire. We're going to start in Deuteronomy chapter 12 and pick up with verse 29. Notice what it says. When Yah your Elohim does cut off from before you the nations which you go to dispossess, and you dispossess them, and dwell in their land. Guard yourself that you are not ensnared to follow them after they are destroyed from before you, and that you do not inquire about their mighty ones, saying, how did these nations serve their mighty ones? And let me do so too. Do not do so to Yah your Elohim, for every abomination which Yah hates, they have done to their mighty ones, for they even burn their sons and daughters in the fire to their mighty ones. And so Yah is saying, when I bring you into the land and you dispossess those nations that were there before you, do not ask them, how did you worship your false deities? And then learn from them that manner in which they worship their false deities, and then worship Yah in the same manner. Don't worship Yah the way the pagans worshiped their false deities. Don't bring in their ways. Don't adopt their days. Don't use their practices to worship Yah by. Yah says that's an abomination. He says, for every abomination which I hate, they have done to their mighty ones. So don't apply the same abominations to your worship of me. I will reject it. It's strange fire. I will reject you if you do it. Goes on to say they even burn their sons and their daughters in the fire to their mighty ones. This is talking about burning their children on the altar to Molech, a false deity. They would take their newborns and they would burn their newborns on the altar to Molech. And Yah says that's an abomination. And don't you even think about worshiping me in the same manner as the nations. And then we go to Deuteronomy chapter 18, starting with verse 9. It says, when you come into the land which Yah your Elohim is giving you, do not learn to do according to the abominations of those nations. Don't learn to do the same things. Let no one be found among you who makes his son or his daughter pass through the fire. Again, speaking of burning your children on the altar to Molech. Or one who practices divination, or a user of magic, or one who interprets omens, or a sorcerer, or one who conjures spells, or a medium, or a spiritist, or one who calls up the dead. For whoever does these is an abomination to Yah. And because of these abominations, Yah, your Elohim, drives them out from before you. Be perfect before Yah, your Elohim. How are you going to be perfect? You're going to simply obey Him. Do it His way. Don't offer strange fire. Worship Him with a form of worship that is defined by the Torah. Be perfect before Yah, your Elohim. For these nations whom you are possessing do listen to those using magic and to diviners. But as for you, Yah, your Elohim, has not appointed such for you. He'll tell you exactly the way He wants you to worship Him. He is set apart, and His Torah is set apart. And if you will obey His word, you will also be set apart. And then Jeremiah chapter 10, beginning with verse 1, says this, hear the word which Yah speaks to you, O house of Israel. Thus said Yah, do not learn the way of the nations. There it is again. And do not be awed by the signs of the heavens, for the nations are awed by them. In other words, they worship them. Don't worship the sun or the moon or the stars. For the laws or the ways of these peoples are worthless. And then we see Shaul in the writings of the emissaries in Ephesians chapter 4, beginning with verse 17, echoing all of these things from the Torah and the prophets. It says, so this I say and witness in the Master, that you should no longer walk as the nations walk. Isn't that what it says in the Torah? Isn't that what it says in the prophets? That you're not to walk as the nations walk? In the futility of their mind, having been darkened in their understanding, having been estranged from the life of Elohim because of the ignorance that is in them, because of the hardness of their heart. This is a description of those pagans, those of the nations who worship their false deities according to abominations. And Shaul, or Paul, is saying, you former Gentiles who have come to belief in Yeshua, you do not continue to walk this way. Verse 19, who having become callous, have given themselves up to indecency, to work all uncleanness with greediness, but you have not so learned Messiah. In other words, there's a different way to walk in Messiah. If indeed you have heard him and were taught by him, as truth is in Yeshua, that you put off with regard to your former behavior. Stop living like the nations. Put off with regard to your former behavior the old man, being corrupted according to the desires of the deceit or deceitful desires. Verse 23, and to be renewed in the spirit of your mind, and that you put on the renewed man, or the new man, which was created according to Elohim in righteousness and set apartness of the truth. When you obey the truth, you're walking in righteousness. And so this new man is created according to Elohim in righteousness. We're going to see later on in this message that through our belief in Yeshua, we receive the power to be able to fulfill the righteous requirement of the Torah. In other words, we're going to be empowered by Yah through his Spirit to be able to obey the Torah, to worship in the manner that Yah prescribes, and to offer up the right kind of offering without any strange fire. Hallelujah. So let's get into a few examples of strange fire being offered in the scripture. And there are many, and I'm just going to touch on 3. And we'll learn a lot. We'll glean a lot from these examples. We're going to first go to Numbers chapter 16 and begin with verse 1. And this is the story of Korach and Dathan and Abiram. It says, and Korach, son of Yitzhar, son of Kehath, son of Lewi, took both Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab, and On, son of Peleth, sons of Reuben, and they rose up before Moshe with some of the children of Israel, 250 leaders of the congregation, called ones of the meeting, men of name. So these are men of notoriety. They're called ones, significant people in the congregation. And they assembled against Moshe. So this is a rebellion. They assembled against Moshe and against Aharon and said to them, enough of you, for all the congregation is set apart. We're all set apart. We're all just as set apart as you are. All of them. And Yah is in their midst. In other words, you're not special. You don't have a special calling. There's nothing special about you. We're all just as set apart as you are. And Yah is in our midst. Why then do you lift up yourselves above the assembly of Yah? See, they're accusing them of lifting themselves up. They didn't lift themselves up. Yah chose them. Yah chose Moshe. Yah chose Aharon and his sons. And when Moshe heard, he fell on his face and spoke to Korach and all his company, saying, tomorrow morning Yah shall make known who is his and who is set apart, and bring him near to him. And let him bring near to him the one whom he chooses. He's going to show everyone who he has chosen. Do this. Take fire holders, Korach, and all your company, and put fire in them, and put incense in them before Yah tomorrow. And it shall be that the one whom Yah chooses is the set apart one. Enough of you, sons of Levi. And Moshe said to Korach, hear now, you sons of Levi, is it little to you that the Elohim of Israel has separated you from the congregation of Israel to bring you near to himself, to perform the service of the dwelling place of Yah, and to stand before the congregation to serve them? And that he has brought you near to himself, you and all your brothers, the sons of Levi, with you? Is that not significant enough for you? He separated you from all the other tribes. Is that not good enough for you? Yet you seek the priesthood as well. See, they wanted to take Aharon's position and the positions of Aharon's sons. They wanted the priesthood. Verse 11, therefore you and all your company are set against Yah. You're not just set against Moshe and Aharon, you're set against Yah. And Aharon, what is he that you grumble against him? Verse 12, and Moshe sent to call Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab, but they said, we are not coming up. Is it little that you have brought us up out of a land flowing with milk and honey? They're calling Mitzrayim a land flowing with milk and honey. To kill us in the wilderness. That you would also seize total rule over us. Also, you have not brought us into a land flowing with milk and honey, nor given us inheritance of fields and vineyards. Would you bore out the eyes of these men? We are not coming up. This is complete rebellion. And Moshe became very displeased and said to Yah, do not respect their offering. I have not taken one donkey from them, nor have I done harm to any of them. Then Moshe said to Korach, tomorrow you and all your company shall be there before Yah. You and they and Aharon, and take each one his fire holder, and you shall put incense in it. And let each one bring his fire holder before Yah, 250 fire holders, and you and Aharon, each one with his fire holder. So each one took his fire holder and put fire in it and laid incense on it and stood at the door of the tent of appointment with Moshe and Aharon. And Korach assembled all the congregation against them at the door of the tent of appointment. Then the esteem of Yah appeared to all the congregation, and Yah spoke to Moshe and to Aharon, saying, separate yourselves from the midst of this congregation and let me consume them in a moment. So we see the wrath of Yah rising up. Verse 22, but they fell on their faces and said, O Elohim of the spirits of all flesh, when one man sins, are you wroth with all the congregation? And Yah spoke to Moshe, saying, speak to the congregation, saying, move away from around the tents of Korach, Dathan, and Abiram. So Moshe rose up and went to Dathan and Abiram, and the elders of Israel followed him. And he spoke to the congregation, saying, please turn away from the tents of these wrong men. Do not touch whatever belongs to them, lest you be consumed in all their sins. Then they moved away from around the tents of Korach, Dathan, and Abiram. And Dathan and Abiram came out and stood at the door of their tents with their wives and their sons and their little children. And Moshe said, by this you know that Yah has sent me to do all these works, that they are not from my own heart. If these die as all men do, or if they are visited as all men are visited, then Yah has not sent me. But if Yah creates what is unheard of, and the earth opens its mouth and swallows them up with all that belongs to them, and they go down alive into Sheol, then you shall know that these men have scorned Yah. And it came to be, as he ended speaking all these words, that the ground under them split apart, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them up with their households and all the men with Korach and all their goods. So they and all those with them went down alive into Sheol, and the earth closed over them, and they perished from the midst of the assembly. And all Israel who were round about them fled at their cry, for they said, lest the earth swallow us up. And a fire came out from Yah and consumed 250 men who were offering incense. Again, we see the same thing happening here. When you don't follow Yah's prescription, when you don't do it His way, when you think that you can force Yah to do it your way, when you offer up strange fire, Yah is not going to send forth fire to receive your sacrifices and your offerings. Instead, He's going to send forth fire to consume you who are offering up strange fire. We see that in these two cases that we've talked about so far. And then let's go over to 1 Samuel chapter 2, and we'll pick up with verse 12. And this is the sons of Eli. Eli was the high priest in the dwelling place at Shiloh. It says, and the sons of Eli were sons of Belial. They did not know Yah. And the ruling of the priest with the people was that when any man slaughtered a slaughtering, the priest's servant shall come with a 3-pronged flesh hook in his hand while the meat was cooking, and shall strike it into the basin or kettle or cauldron or pot. So this practice was not something that was prescribed in the Torah. This is just something that these evil men were doing. And the priest would take for himself all that the flesh hook brought up. Thus they did at Shiloh to all Israel who came there. Also, before they burned the fat, the priest's servant would come and say to the man who slaughtered, give meat for roasting to the priest, for he does not accept cooked meat from you, but raw. And if the man said to him, let the fat be burned up first, then take as much as your being desires, he would then answer him, no, but give it to me now. And if not, I shall take it by strength, or I shall take it by force. And the sin of the young men was very great before Yah, for the men despised the offering of Yah. They weren't doing it Yah's way. They were completely selfish. They were imposing their own desires upon the people, and they were despising the offering of Yah. Look at 1 Samuel chapter 2 and verse 22. It says, and Eli was very old and had heard all that his sons were doing to all Israel, and how they lay with the women who were assembled at the door of the tent of appointment. And he said to them, why do you do deeds like these? For I hear of your evil deeds from all the people. No, my sons, for it is not a good report that I hear, making the people of Yah transgress. If one man sins against another, Elohim shall judge him. But if a man sins against Yah, who shall pray for him? And they were sinning against Yah. But they did not listen to the voice of their father, though Yah was pleased to put them to death. And so we see in 1 Samuel chapter 2, verse 27, it says, And a man of Elohim came to Eli and said to him, Thus said Yah, did I not clearly reveal myself to the house of your father when they were in Mitzrayim, in Pharaoh's house, even to choose him out of all the tribes of Israel to be my priest, to offer upon my slaughter place, to burn incense, and to wear a shoulder garment before me? And did I not give to the house of your father all the offerings of the children of Israel made by fire? Why do you kick at my slaughtering and my offering, which I have commanded in my dwelling place, and esteem your sons above me, to make yourself fat with the best of all the offerings of Israel, my people? You're not doing it my way, and you're not doing enough to stop your sons. And so my rebuke is coming to you, and my judgment is coming upon your household. Therefore, Yah Elohim of Israel declares, I said indeed that your house and the house of your father would walk before me forever. But now Yah declares, far be it from me, for those who highly esteem me, I highly esteem, and those who despise me are lightly esteemed. And they were despising him. See, the days are coming that I shall cut off your arm and the arm of your father's house, so that an old man shall not be found in your house. And you shall see an enemy in my dwelling place. Despite all the good which Elohim does for Israel, and there shall not be an old man in your house forever. But any of your men whom I do not cut off from my slaughter place is to consume your eyes and grieve your life, and all the increase of your house die as men. And this is the sign to you that comes upon your two sons, upon Hophni and Phinehas. In one day they are going to die, both of them. And I shall raise up for myself a trustworthy priest who does according to what is in my heart and in my being. And I shall build him a steadfast house, and he shall walk before my anointed forever. And so Yah is looking for a people who will worship him according to his desire. A pure form of worship that is defined by his Torah. He's looking for trustworthy priests who do according to what's in his heart and in his being. And he says, I shall build him a steadfast house, and he shall walk before my anointed forever. And so the third example of strange fire that I want to talk about today is found in 1 Kings chapter 11, starting with verse 43. And this is concerning Jeroboam and the 10 tribes, and how the kingdom of Israel under David and then Shlomo, how it was divided, and how the northern tribes, calling themselves Israel, went off into idolatry and doing abominations. It says, so Shlomo slept with his fathers and was buried in the city of David his father, and Rehoboam his son reigned in his place. 1 Kings chapter 12 and verse 1. And Rehoboam went to Shechem, for all Israel had gone to Shechem to set him up to reign. He's going to be made king. And it came to be, when Jeroboam, son of Nebat, heard this, he was still in Mitzrayim, he was still in Egypt, for he had fled from the presence of sovereign Shlomo and had been dwelling in Mitzrayim, that they sent and called him, talking about the 10 northern tribes. And Jeroboam and all the assembly of Israel came and spoke to Rehoboam, saying, your father made our yoke hard, and now lighten the hard service of your father and his heavy yoke, which he put on us, then we serve you. So your father made it difficult for us in our service to him. If you'll just lighten it a little bit, then we'll serve you. And he said to them, go away for 3 days, then come back to me. And the people went. Then sovereign Rehoboam consulted the elders who stood before his father Shlomo while he still lived. And he said, what do you advise me to answer these people? And of course, these wise men said, if you'll just lighten their load a little bit, if you'll present yourself as one who would serve them, then they will serve you forever. And then he also spoke to the young men that he grew up with. And they said, you should threaten them. And you should say, if you thought my father's yoke was heavy, you wait until you see what I'm going to do to you. 1 Kings chapter 12, verse 16, and all Israel saw that the sovereign did not listen to them. Then the people answered the sovereign, saying, what portion do we have in David? And there is no inheritance in the son of Yeshai. To your mighty ones, O Israel. Now see to your own house, O David. So Israel went to their tents. And so Rehoboam went with the advice of the young men, and he threatened the tribes of Israel. And they broke off. They divided. And they went to their own tents. 1 Kings chapter 12 and verse 19, it says, thus Israel revolted against the house of David to this day. And then we see that the 10 tribes made Jeroboam king over them. And then 1 Kings chapter 12 and verse 26, it says, and Jeroboam said in his heart, now the reign shall return to the house of David. So they made Jeroboam king over them, but he's now concerned that if the people go down to Jerusalem to celebrate the feast, that they are no longer going to want to follow Jeroboam, but they are going to return to the house of David. Verse 27, if these people go up to do slaughterings in the house of Yah at Jerusalem, in other words, to do it according to Yah's instructions, then the heart of this people shall turn back to their master Rehoboam, sovereign of Yehudah, and they shall kill me and go back to Rehoboam, sovereign of Yehudah. Verse 28, so the sovereign took counsel, notice, and made 2 calves of gold and said to the people, it is too much for you to go up to Jerusalem. See, your mighty ones are these calves of gold, O Israel, which brought you up from the land of Mitzrayim. And he set up one in Beit El, and the other he put in Dan. And this matter became a sin. Of course it is. For the people went before the one as far as Dan. So he led the people into idolatry. He led the people into strange fire. They were no longer going to go down to Jerusalem and do it the way the Torah said to do it. Now they're making up man-made religion here. Jeroboam is doing it according to his desire. And he's offering strange fire to Yah. Verse 31, and he made the house of high places and made priests from all sorts of people who were not of the sons of Levi. Again, he's not doing it according to Torah. This is man-made religion. And Jeroboam performed a festival on the 15th day of the 8th new moon. Well, there already was a festival, according to Torah, on the 15th day of the 7th new moon, called Sukkot. And so now Jeroboam is creating his own feasts, different from what the scripture says. This is most definitely strange fire. So he says, all right, we're going to have a feast to Yah on the 15th day of the 8th new moon. It says, like the festival that was in Yehudah. It's like it, but it wasn't it. And he offered on the slaughter place. So he did at Beit El, slaughtering to the calves that he had made. And at Beit El, he appointed the priests of the high places which he had made. And he made offerings on the slaughter place which he had made at Beit El on the 15th day of the 8th new moon, in the new moon which he had devised in his own heart. This is strange fire. He's not doing it according to Yah's instructions. He's making up false religion. He's trying to force Yah to accept his way. And he performed a festival for the children of Israel and offered on the slaughter place and burned incense. Well, was Yah pleased with that? Look at 1 Kings chapter 13, beginning with verse 1. And see, a man of Elohim went from Yehudah to Beit El by the word of Yah, while Jeroboam was standing by the slaughter place to burn incense. And he cried out against the slaughter place by the word of Yah, and said, O slaughter place, thus said Yah, see, a son is to be born to the house of David. Yoshiyahu is his name, and on you he shall slaughter the priests of the high places who burn incense on you, and men's bones be burned on you. And he gave a sign the same day, saying, this is the sign which Yah has spoken. See, the slaughter place is split apart, and the ashes on it is poured out. And it came to be, when sovereign Jeroboam heard the saying of the man of Elohim who cried out against the slaughter place in Beit El, that he stretched out his hand from the slaughter place, saying, seize him. Then his hand, which he stretched out toward him, dried up, so that he was unable to bring it back to him. And the slaughter place was split apart, and the ashes poured out from the slaughter place, according to the sign which the man of Elohim had given by the word of Yah. And the sovereign answered and said to the man of Elohim, please appease the face of Yah, your Elohim, and pray for me that my hand might be restored to me. And the man of Elohim appeased the face of Yah, and the sovereign's hand was restored to him and became as it was before. And then we're looking at 1 Kings 14, chapter 1. It says, at that time, Abijah, the son of Jeroboam, became sick. So the king, Jeroboam, had a son who became sick. And Jeroboam said to his wife, please arise and disguise yourself, so that they do not know that you are the wife of Jeroboam, and go to Shiloh. See, Ahijah, the prophet, is there, who spoke to me of becoming sovereign over this people. 1 Kings chapter 14 and verse 6. And it came to be, when Ahiyahu heard the sound of her footsteps as she came through the door, he said, come in, wife of Jeroboam. Why are you making yourself strange? And I have been sent to you with a hard word. Go say to Jeroboam, thus said Yah, Elohim of Israel, because I exalted you from among the people and made you ruler over my people Israel, and tore the reign away from the house of David and gave it to you. And you have not been as my servant David, who guarded my commands David obeyed the commands and followed the ways of Yah, and who followed me with all his heart, to do only what was right in my eyes. But you have done more evil than all who were before you. You're offering strange fire. For you have gone and made for yourself other mighty ones, and molded images to provoke me, and have cast me behind your back. You despise me. You despise my offering. Verse 10, therefore, see, I am bringing evil to the house of Jeroboam, and shall cut off from Jeroboam every male in Israel, whether shut up or left at large, and sweep away the remnant of the house of Jeroboam, as one sweeps away dung, until it is all gone. Those of Jeroboam who die in the city, the dogs do eat, and those who die in the field, the birds of the heavens do eat, for Yah has spoken it. Now, I want to draw a comparison between Jeroboam and the fact that he offered strange fire by erecting golden calves, building altars. He turned away from the feast of Yah, as described in Leviticus 23. He came up with his own feasts. They were somewhat similar, but they were different. He didn't follow the instructions of Yah, but he tried to force his own will upon Yah. He wanted Yah to accept his offerings his way. I want to compare that to what Christianity as a religion has done. Christianity as a religion has, for all intents and purposes, abolished the seventh-day Sabbath and moved it to the first day. Some teach that it's just a principle of rest and you can pick a day any day. We see that Christianity has abolished the feast of Yah, and they've come up with their own religious holidays like Christmas and Easter and Halloween and Valentine's Day. They say that Christmas is a celebration of the birth of Jesus. And so they juxtapose some biblical context. But they're bringing in trees like pagan tree worship. And it's on the same day that the pagans celebrated the birth of their sun deity, December 25th. We see Easter, instead of it being Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread, we see bunnies and ducks and painted eggs and Easter baskets, and the pagan days and the pagan ways have been all mixed in to the religion. We see the celebration of the dead and spirits and all of that during Halloween. And there's so much paganism in the religion called Christianity. There is much strange fire being offered in the religion that's called Christianity. But in this day that we're living in, Yah by His Spirit is opening up the eyes of those who are studying the Scripture deeply to see that there is a pure form of worship that Yah desires, that is defined by the Torah. And those who have a desire to be obedient and do things according to Yah's instructions are being brought out of mixed up religion, delivered out of the bondage that is Babylon, and brought into an understanding of Torah and all of Scripture, adopting the ways of Yah, walking in the footsteps of Yeshua, who kept the ways of Yah perfectly. Yeshua was completely obedient. He had no sin. He did not transgress the Torah, not in one point. And he calls his taught ones to follow him. And so we are in a period of time now where we are coming to realize that we have inherited falsehood and futility. When I was born, the Christian religion had existed a long time. And paganism was deeply rooted in the religion called Christianity. And I was raised in a Christian home. But I have come to realize that there is much strange fire in Christianity. And I've come to know that I inherited falsehood and futility. In Jeremiah chapter 16, starting with verse 19, we see that the prophet actually states these very words. It says, O Yah, my strength and my stronghold and my refuge. In the day of distress, the nations shall come to you from the ends of the earth and say, our fathers have inherited only falsehood, futility, and there is no value in them. So those who are in the nations, who are seeking a relationship with Yah, their eyes are going to be opened. That's what's happening in the days that we're living in now. And they're going to begin to realize that they've inherited falsehood and futility and worthlessness. And they're going to test everything that they've been taught. And they're going to discard and cast off the shackles of mixed up religion. And they're going to walk with Yeshua in a pure form of worship that is defined by the Torah. Verse 20 says, would a man make mighty ones for himself, which are not mighty ones? Those in the nations are going to come to realize that their mighty ones are false deities. Therefore, see, I am causing them to know. Yah is causing the nations to know. By his Spirit, Yah is opening up blind eyes and unstopping deaf ears. It says, therefore, see, I am causing them to know. This time I cause them to know my hand and my might, and they shall know that my name is Yah. And so when people receive the revelation that there is a pure form of worship defined by Torah, they're going to be convicted in their hearts that they have inherited worthlessness, futility, falsehood, and they're going to turn to the Master in obedience. And that's called teshuvah. When you hear me talk about teshuvah, it's a turning to the Master in obedience. And people are coming out of mixed up religion and performing teshuvah in the days that we're living in. Go with me over to Deuteronomy chapter 30 and verse 1. It says this, and it shall be when all these words come upon you, the blessing and the curse which I have set before you, and you shall bring them back to your heart among all the nations where Yah your Elohim drives you, and shall turn back to Yah your Elohim and obey his voice according to all that I command you today, with all your heart and with all your being, you and your children. In other words, when you are scattered into the nations and you come to realize that there are blessings and there are curses. And you have been suffering in the curses because of your disobedience. And you turn back to Elohim with all your heart and with your children. Notice it says, then Yah, your Elohim, shall turn back your captivity. He's going to release you from your captivity and shall have compassion on you. And he shall turn back and gather you from all the peoples where Yah, your Elohim, has scattered you. If any of you are driven out to the farthest parts under the heavens, from there Yah, your Elohim, does gather you, and from there he does take you. And Yah, your Elohim, shall bring you to the land which your fathers possessed, and you shall possess it. And he shall do good to you and increase you more than your fathers. So if you perform teshuvah, you turn back to him with all your heart, then he's going to bring you back into the land which your fathers possessed. And you will possess it. And he's going to do good to you. And he's going to increase you even more than your fathers. And Yah, your Elohim, shall circumcise your heart and the heart of your seed to love Yah, your Elohim, with all your heart and with all your being, so that you might live. And Yah, your Elohim, shall put all these curses on your enemies and on those who hate you, who persecuted you, and you shall turn back and obey the voice of Yah and do all his commands, which I command you today. That's what's happening even today. Yah is performing it by his Spirit. He's opening up blind eyes and unstopping deaf ears. He's revealing to those who are hungry for a relationship with him that they can perform teshuvah, that they can turn back no matter where they are in the nations. They can turn back and be gathered up and be restored and ultimately be brought into the land and be increased and be blessed. Verse 9, and Yah, your Elohim, shall make you have excess in all the work of your hand, in the fruit of your body, and in the fruit of your livestock, and in the fruit of your ground for good. For Yah turns back to rejoice over you for good, as he rejoiced over your fathers, if you obey the voice of Yah, your Elohim, to guard his commands and his laws, which are written in this book of the Torah. If you turn back, if you do what he prescribes, if you worship him the way he wants to be worshiped, if you give up the strange fire, if you turn back to Yah, your Elohim, with all your heart and with all your being. And so teshuvah is the message that we are preaching today. That Yah is gathering up his people, those who would believe upon Yeshua, those who are in the nations, those who were bound in sin, those who have been a part of mixed up religion, those who have been offering up strange fire. Revelation is coming. And people are turning back to Yah and his pure form of worship, performing teshuvah, being restored. And I want to end today by taking us over to Romans chapter 7. We'll pick up with verse 18 in just a moment, and show you how through belief in Yeshua, we receive the power to fulfill the righteous requirement of the Torah. In other words, through belief in Yeshua, we are empowered to be able to get back to a pure form of worship defined by the Torah, so that we're no longer offering up strange fire. Romans chapter 7, verse 18, for I know that in me, this is Shaul speaking, that is, in my flesh dwells no good. In other words, there are evil inclinations that reside in my flesh. There's nothing good residing in my flesh. For to wish is present with me. He's talking about he has a will, he has a desire to obey the Torah. but to work the good I do not find. The good he's talking about is obedience to the Torah. For the good that I wish to do, that is, obey the Torah, I do not do. But the evil I do not wish to do, this I practice, because of the evil inclinations that reside in his flesh. And if I do that which I do not wish, it is no longer I who work it, but the sin dwelling in me, the sinful and evil inclinations of the flesh. I find therefore this law, or this dynamic, that when I wish to do the good, when I wish to obey the Torah, that the evil is present with me. For I delight in the Torah of Elohim according to the inward man. He's saying, this is Shaul speaking, this is Paul, saying, I delight in the Torah of Elohim according to the inward man. My spirit delights in the Torah of Elohim. Shaul didn't abolish the Torah of Elohim. Shaul's spirit man delights in the Torah of Elohim. Goes on to say, but I see another Torah or law or dynamic in my members battling against the Torah of my mind. The Torah of the mind is the will. So these evil inclinations in my body, in my members, are warring against my will, what I want to do. And what I want to do is obey the Torah, and bringing me into captivity to the Torah or the law. This is little t Torah, the law or dynamic of sin, which is in my members. Verse 24, wretched man that I am, who shall deliver me from this body of death, this body that houses these evil inclinations that have held me captive and drive me into sin, and sin leads to death. Who shall deliver me from this body of death? Thanks to Elohim through Yeshua, Messiah, our Master. It's through belief in Yeshua, Messiah, our Master, that we are delivered from this body of death. So then, with the mind, I myself truly serve the Torah of Elohim. Again, this is Shaul or Paul saying that with my mind, I myself truly serve the Torah of Elohim. He hadn't abolished the Torah. He serves the Torah with his mind. But with the flesh, the little t Torah, or the dynamic of sin. So my mind wants to obey the Torah, but my flesh is bound to sin. Chapter 8 and verse 1. There is then now no condemnation to those who are in Messiah Yeshua, who do not walk according to the flesh. You don't walk after these evil inclinations in your flesh, but according to the Spirit. So through belief in Yeshua, we receive the promise of the Father. And the promise of the Father is the promise of Yah's indwelling, set-apart Spirit. Yah breathes on us. He causes His wind to blow upon us. And we are filled with His Spirit. And so there is no condemnation for those who are in Messiah Yeshua, who do not walk according to the flesh, or walk after the evil inclinations of the flesh, but according to the Spirit. For the Torah, little t Torah, dynamic of the Spirit of the life in Messiah Yeshua, has set me free from the Torah, the little t Torah, of sin and of death. So this wonderful power that I have through belief in Yeshua, and the fact that I've been filled with the Spirit, and I'm walking according to the Spirit, this dynamic has set me free from the Torah or the law of sin and death. You sin, you die. Hallelujah. Verse 3, for the Torah being powerless, in other words, the Torah did not have power to make people obey it. For the Torah being powerless, in that it was weak through the flesh, because there were evil inclinations residing in the flesh. Elohim, having sent His own Son in the likeness of flesh of sin, or in the likeness of sinful flesh, and concerning sin, condemned sin in the flesh. In other words, rendered sin powerless. Notice, so that the righteousness, the righteous requirement of the Torah, what the Torah requires, the righteousness that the Torah requires. In other words, the fulfillment or the obedience to the commandments that are in the Torah. so that the righteousness of the Torah should be completed in us, who do not walk according to the flesh, but according to the Spirit. In other words, when you believe in Yeshua and you receive the set-apart Spirit of Yah, and you're walking according to the Spirit, then you are empowered to obey the Torah. The righteous requirement of the Torah is completed in those of us who believe in Yeshua and are filled with Yah's Spirit. As we walk according to the Spirit, we are empowered to obey the Scripture, to obey the Torah, to please Yah, to walk in His ways, to worship Him with a pure form of worship that is defined by the Torah. No longer are we offering up strange fire. No longer are we in mixed up religion, but we come out of Babylon and we walk in the ways of Yah, following in the footsteps of Yeshua. Through belief in Yeshua and the empowerment of Yah's Spirit, we are able to please the Father and worship Him in a manner that He has prescribed. Hallelujah.